Hi, my name is Jason Morgan. I'm a wildlife artist, and today I'm using a different kind of pastel pencil for me. They're Gioconda and they're soft pastel pencils, and the thing that's attracted me to these is their vibrancy. And you can see on the top shelf there's lots and lots of really rich vibrant colours, and on the bottom shelf there, just pick up these tabs and there's more muted colours on there as well. So 48 in the set, and what I wanted to actually do then was pick a very vibrant subject, so that I could really push these pencils to their limit on pastel paper. And I've selected this Peacock Butterfly. I couldn't think of anything else that was as punchy as this. And some of the other pastel pencils, they would have struggled a bit to get a lot of richness in some of these colours. So this is my reference photo. I've transferred it over onto white pastel matte paper, and as most of you would know if you follow my Patreon channel or my YouTube channel, I don't use white pastel paper very often at all. But when a subject requires a very high degree of vibrancy and pure colour, and you want that light shining through it, that's when I use white paper. So what I'm doing actually at the moment is just blocking in the background. Now you can use pencils. Pencils on this side is very good, and you can then blend them in like that. Here I'm just selecting another colour, so you can see that I actually put the colours actually on top of each other as well. Now the other way of doing backgrounds is with soft pastels, so that would be the ones that look like quite large sticks, usually about the thickness of your finger. But if you've only got pencils and you haven't got much of a background to put in, pencils are fine, especially these Giocondas, because as I said, they are a bit softer than my standard pencils, and that softness helps with the richness, and that's why I'm going to be able to get lots of vibrant colours in there as well. Now I'm going to speed this section up because I'm just layering colour over the top of other colour, because the pencils don't deposit as much pastel down as would soft pastel sticks. So that would be the disadvantage of doing a blurry background in pencil, especially if you've got a large background. So as you can imagine, a lot of the pencil would weigh down very, very quickly. So the alternative to the pencils for the background, as I mentioned, would be soft pastels. So that's what I'm using here. As you've seen probably on my other videos, there's lots and lots of different makes of these. All of them have got a different kind of variance of hardness. So we've got some very, very soft ones like Unison and Senelia. You've got harder versions then like Rembrandt, and they all blend very well. And you can see I'm using the top edge of the paper outside my border to try out different colours. I don't want to go too dark with the background, and sometimes the colour of the stick, although it's the colour you're going to get, actually does look a little bit different on the paper, so it's worth testing it out first. So with soft pastels, it's just a case of rubbing it on. I usually use small kind of circular motions, and then I generally use my finger once I've deposited enough pastel on there to blend it and to blur it. This is a much faster process than with the pencils, of course. And once I've got a decent amount of pastel down on there, I use my finger then, circular motions again to blend. You see I'm keeping the areas separate. I've got a little cloth. You can use a microfiber cloth or chamois leather or something on my lap, and that's cleaning my finger. I'm just rubbing it on there once or twice. just to keep the colours quite separate, especially when I'm going from a light colour to a dark colour or vice versa, and I don't want to contaminate. And with pastels, we've generally got to build up layers to get the effect that we want, especially on a background. We don't have to worry too much about filling up the tooth of the paper. I'm using pastel matte paper as I generally do here, so that will take those layers. But with the background, we're not going to be putting detail on top of it anyway. So the more layers we get, the smoother the look. And I'm just going to continue this process now to keep adding the different colours that I see. Don't have to follow that background exactly. And then I'll do the blending again. I'll just continue doing that over the whole of the background. Okay, so now I'm going to actually paint in the dark blacks of the butterfly. And in all honesty, I should have done this before I started the background. It doesn't really make a lot of difference. I'm using gouache paint. It's watered down slightly. The reason I'm doing it, if you watch my bee demonstration or some of my others, more recently I'm putting in the blacks like this, especially if I'm on something like white paper. It allows me to keep the blacks visible, because sometimes pastel, when I'm blending, will actually go over the edges, and I use it if I want to keep a clean black, a very dark black, like I do on these butterflies' wings. Because if I've got a colour underneath, especially if there's contamination with another pastel, I'll struggle to get it pure black. And it is much easier to get that pure black when you've got a black under drawing, under painting, such as this. If you try out your own subject and it's got very, very black areas such as this, especially if they're quite large, try this out and you'll see the difference that I mean. It's much easier to keep the black a very strong black if you actually paint these very dark areas. Just block them in. Now the reason I'm using gouache is because it dries perfectly matte, so it looks just like pastel and there's no reflection to it, and the pastel will adhere or sit on the surface of that very easily. If I used acrylic, it would probably work, possibly not as well, because the acrylic doesn't dry matte such as the gouache. Watercolor, black watercolor, pretty much straight out the tube, just a little bit of water, that would have worked as well. So now that black is dry, and it doesn't take long to dry at all on this paper, I'm just going to come back in and block in the rest of this background. So background's blocked in, now it's time to actually start on the butterfly itself. And it's going to be more of a case of just watching actually what I'm doing. If there's any special instructions, I'll make sure I slow it all right down and go into detail with those for you. The paper I'm resting on is glassine paper, and that's basically an acid-free paper. It allows me to see through it as well, which helps a little bit, but the main reason I'm using it is to keep that background quite clean. And I've taped a sheet of the glassine, you can see it on the right hand side, that's protecting most of the background, and then I've got a small square of it that I'm actually moving around to rest my hand on. As usual, when I want a smooth area, I'm using circular strokes with the pastel. I'm not pushing too hard yet, this is just the first layers. You can see the pencil of the butterfly on the outside edge. I've gone very slightly over that with the background, just very slightly. That's going to have a dark edge to it, so I'll be able to overlap onto that. You don't want to just butt the background up to the line, it does need to go slightly over it. So the first colour I'm putting in is generally the mid-tone, as close as I can match it. Remember, I'm using 48 colours. I've got hundreds of pastel pencils, but I wanted to do the whole of the butterfly just in the Gioconda. That was the whole idea for picking this subject. Wanted to really push those vibrant colours. So at the moment I'm using more of the subtle shades in there, and then I'll really start to punch it up when I'm using those purples, reds and yellows. But at the moment the pencils are working perfectly well. They're just a little bit softer than Pitt pastels and Carbothello pencils. They sharpen really well with my swordfish crank handle sharpener, because some pencils can be very soft and then you can't sharpen them with the crank handle and you need a blade. So it's a benefit that these are holding together and there's no problems sharpening them. So I'm just going to carry on blocking in, and then I can start on those vibrant colours. So I've zoomed right in now, so you can see me actually drawing in one of these more punchy coloured areas of the butterfly with the purples, the blues, reds and yellows. If I want a very subtle colour and the pencil I've got is too vibrant, I can put some white down first. And that's what I just did. I just put a little fine layer of white down, and then when I'm putting this purple on top, as I said, these Giocondas can be very vibrant, then it's not as punchy a colour. And I can obviously put white on top of it as well. And in this tutorial you'll also see that I use the white to actually blend and to push colours together. Sometimes areas are too small for your fingers. You want a very subtle blend and perhaps also lighten it a small amount, and that's when a very gentle touch with a white pencil will really create that smooth transition. I'm using a light pressure here because these pencils are really intense, lots of pigment in them. And going over the top with a small amount of that purple, just making those colours up, layering the colours. And then I'm coming back in now with the white, and you'll see how I'll use it very gently, as I said, to blend these together. Now those colours are in place, I'm going to come in with this super punchy red, using a bit harder pressure now because I want to deposit quite a lot of the pigment. And now it's really apparent just how vibrant these Kuino Gioconda pastels are. The edge is a bit more softer, so I'm just dabbing the pencil on there. Remember, these are only the underlayers. I'll come back in with lots more detail later on. And on the edge is a small amount of yellow, just a few dots here and there. And once I've got the base colour down, I can assess the colours that I've got on there. And I thought this top area needed to be a bit more blue, so I'm just floating colour, just gently touching here and there to increase the blue, and now I'm starting on the purple as well. And that's the process I'm going to continue to use pretty much over the whole of the butterfly. So if I've got these tiny dots that I can see actually on the reference, that's when I'll just be doing the dotty dabby motion of the pencil. So now I'm happy with that area. I'm going to come back in and work on the edge of the butterfly, on the edge of the wing, and I'll also add some of the darker colours there as well. And those dark colours on the edge, that's what's really going to separate and bring the drawing forward, the butterfly's wings forward from the background. Working sharp and hard against soft. So this is the moment I've personally been waiting for with this drawing, to take the most vibrant Gioconda red and try to get the vibrancy of the red in this peacock butterfly's wing. As I said, a lot of pastel pencils won't have the vibrancy to be able to tackle this subject, and most of the time when I'm doing wildlife I want subtle colours as well, but for something like this, or florals, flowers, you really want and need those punchy colours just to do it some justice. And you can see so far that this red is really performing excellent. That white paper underneath is helping to create that freshness, that vibrancy. I'm not struggling against the paper at all. And of course with pastel matte I can freely add quite a lot of pastel because I know it'll take even more. And sometimes there's a subtle colour change. You can see there's kind of a golden area on the side and around here as well. It's quite subtle, but I bring the red then on top of it. It's easier. The red is an even more vibrant colour. It's easier. You can see I'm just dotting it around and still allowing some of that yellow to show through. And of course these are just our first couple of layers, and I'll build up the details on top of this a lot. Once again, where I want the yellow to show through, putting that down first because it's easier for me to get the black on top. I know the black will sit on top of the yellow, so I'm not worried about leaving small spaces at all. And it doesn't have to be black anyway. Just lightening the colour with some white. So obviously with 48 pencils I haven't got everything, you know, a massive amount of range. 48 is a good number to have, but as you know, if you use coloured pencils or pastel pencils, you can never have too many of a colour. So I use the white then to actually lighten areas as and when required. Working on the bottom section now of the wing, more muted colours here, and there's a great range in the Gioconda as well of the browns, and also a few nice greys in there too. But don't forget, with pastels we can layer a colour on top of another to kind of push and influence the colour one way or another. So rather than, as I've said on a few videos, using a blue under pencil and then going over with a yellow to make it green, we don't really do that with pastels. You put your main colour down and then you can push it slightly one way or the other by glazing pastels on top of it, so by lightly putting the pastel on top. So I'm going to use, I want this area quite soft looking, so I'm going to use my usual circular strokes, just little tiny circular strokes, to build up this brown area. And now the big benefit with pastels is that once I've built up some pastel like I have here, and I want a smooth transition, I can just go over it with my finger, lightly blend, or even lightly blend with the white pastel, and it'll give me a perfectly smooth transition. So I'm using just my little finger, just the tip of it, and working my way around, and you can see how that's really blended quite nicely. Obviously it's not punchy yet because we haven't got that black outline. I'm not concerned about that yet. And now I've got that basically in place, I can come back in and start refining it, getting the colours more accurate, getting the lights and darks more accurate. So basically going over it again with more accurate colours and tones. And then it's when I come back in then with that really dark black, and you see how black it'll look when I go over the areas that I've painted. That's when that punchiness that I really need with this butterfly will come through, adding a lot of contrast, and I don't have to have much black pastel down on the paper to get that super black appearance. So that's starting to look much closer to how I wanted it, more realistic, and to make it look even more so, I'm coming in with some of these little speckles, just touching the surface of the pastel. I won't blend over this then if I want to keep these little speckledy areas. Now I'm going to start working my way out now. Same technique, blocking in the rest of the back section of the wing. And looking at it now, it's all starting to look pretty good. Happy with the way it's coming out, really happy with the vibrancy of the colours, and creating all this with, you know, probably half of the 48 colours in the set. Now with this red area on the bottom wing, I don't want to muddy it too much. It is still quite a vibrant colour, so I want to get a lot of that red in there, and then I'll influence that with some of the browns and brown greens, rather than just putting in a brown and trying to float or layer the red on top. I think I'll get a better effect doing it this way. Sometimes much easier to subdue a colour than to make a colour richer. Now to get this speckledy look, I think I could have gone in with this dark browny black and tried to lay the yellow on, but as I said earlier, it's easier to subdue a colour than to make it richer. So I've got the yellow underneath, the yellow orange, and I'm just coming in with this dark colour, and I'm allowing some of the yellow orange to show through. I can always come back in then and put other colours on top, but it'd be very difficult to get the dots of tiny bits of yellow actually on top of a very dark underdrawing. So just going to continue now. The body is quite easy to do, not a lot of detail on there at all. And I'm just going to block that in with just a few of these more muted colours. Okay, so that's the body blocked in. Now it's time to actually work my way down the paper, work on the bottom wing, working out towards the top. Just because I'm right-handed, and that'll mean less time sitting or resting my hand actually onto areas that I've already drawn on there. I'll finish the flowers at the end because I'll be working with just those range of colours then. I won't have to be concerned about the swapping and changing colours all the time. So I'd rather get the butterfly in completely first, then do the flowers, then do the final details on the whole piece. So obviously with this wing, it's going to be pretty much identical to the wing that we did on top. Funnily enough, I think this is actually the trickiest part of the butterfly, this speckled area. I worked out on a scrap piece of paper that this would actually give me a similar effect to the reference before I tried it out on the paper, and I always recommend you use a bit of scrap. So I used pastel mat, but I only had a square or two and of scrap there. Useful to keep all those little offcuts, even if they're only an inch strip, because you can try all these things out, and then you're not going to ruin work that you may have spent a few hours on. So as you can see, identical techniques. Getting the colours down first. Got quite a sharp pencil now to get these dots, these subduing dots on top. And once again, I'll come back in with our vibrant reds, oranges and yellows. It's not very often with the animals that I draw that both sides are pretty much identical. So there's usually some sort of shadow or something over it, but on this butterfly it's really quite evenly lit. So both sides are very, very similar. Now for the little veins, I've actually got a little bit of the pencil nib that broke off, and I'm not going to waste it. It still works perfectly well. So to put these little tiny dots in that I can see on the wings and the little veins, I'm just holding the nib. It's working exactly the same as if it was on the tip of the pencil. I'm just very, very lightly tapping the surface to put those in. all that's really left to do with the butterfly now, of the main parts, is just to get this edging in place. Do that last bit of brown then on the top part of this right hand side wing, and then it'll be on to actually putting in the subdued flowers. I don't want them to be too punchy. I want all the attention to go onto the butterfly, so I may even subdue them a bit more than they actually are in the reference photo. So I'm just going to get the edge in place here and then come back in with those browns. So as I bring this video part 1 to an end, hope you've picked up a few tips here and there. Another very different subject for me. I'm hoping if I show you as many different subjects out there, it'll give you the confidence to tackle lots of things that perhaps you didn't think you could actually achieve yourself. So on video 2, that's when I'm really going to pull all this together, detail the butterfly a lot more, spend a lot of time as well actually on the flowers in that bottom corner.